Hello, and welcome to another episode of Dicey Encounters. This week we have had a call for help from a fan of the show and a friend of mine, Rob. He's asked a question on last week's video and what he would like to see. So we're going to go ahead and see what Rob has asked. So Rob said, I'm looking to dive into some homebrew content pretty soon, and the whole idea of world building is pretty daunting, as I'm not sure where to start. Would love to see a video on world building tips. So, world building in D&D and in most role-playing games is a very, very daunting task. You're right, it is incredibly daunting. But like most things a DM can do, you can start small and you can get bigger. So, before we go into the tips that I've got, don't forget that you can always just do a little of your own homebrew content. You can slide in a little homebrew quest or adventure in between main quests. You can even just do it once. Just say to your players, hey guys, I want to try this out, and just try it out and see how it goes. Or you can just improv the whole thing and ask them the questions to fill out the world, just to get used to it. But here are my settings if you want to actually start making a world for your entire campaign. So the first step is you got to pick a setting. If you want to stay in the Forgotten Realms, that's totally cool, that's fine. But don't forget you have other settings as well. You've got Ravnica, which just came out, Eberron, that just came out, Ravenloft, if you get the Curse of Strahd book, you can do your own adventure in that. You could just take one of those and make changes to it. You could take the Forgotten Realms, but add steam power. Or, you could take the Forgotten Realms or something and you could change the races about. You could drop certain races you don't like. You can add some other races from other books. You can add Minotaurs and the Centaurs from Ravnica because they're really awesome. Replace the gnomes and stuff. In the Dungeon Master's Guide, they have different flavors of fantasy. So instead of going for the typical high fantasy, you could go more dark fantasy or like swashbuckling or sword and sorcery. Basically, these are ways to change fantasy to make them more interesting to your players. And you can always ask your players what kind of fantasy they like. Maybe they've read The Lies of Locke Lamora, which is kind of a human-only, city-based thieves guild kind of setting. So maybe it's the dragons and the gnomes and the goblins that they don't like. And maybe they want to have just a human-focused, more kind of relatable world. Maybe they want something a bit more Lord of the Ringsy, where magic is kind of unexplained and only very few members of the whole world can actually use it. Or maybe you can pull a James Cameron and maybe you make all the humans the bad guys. Oh my god, terrifying. Another tip that I heard was that you can basically assign races kind of a rarity value and then get your players to roll a d100 for the race. So their race is randomly determined. So you could say that humans are 90% of the world or 80% of the world, 10% is elves, or no, 10% is dwarfs, 5% is something else, and then you could have like that 1% or that 2% or that 5%, which is like half orcs, dragonborn, and you can make so they actually feel like, oh my god, I'm a freak. I'm really not. There's not a lot of me, basically. Number two, pick the kind of adventure that you want to run. If you're interested in running a dungeon delving adventure, then you should probably focus on that 70 floor dungeon rather than focusing on the way the world works and its various religions and deities and all that kind of stuff. Is it going to be more urban? Is it going to be city based? Is it going to be lots of civilization? Or is it going to be wilderness based? Is there going to be a lot of going out in the wilds and not much civilization at all? So if it's the former and it's more city based, consider taking social encounters and really adding a lot more to it. So even maybe come up with a mechanic where you have this plus or minus score based system where every time a player gets a successful persuasion roll, you go up, and every time a player fails it, you go down. And have certain characters who are more likely to be susceptible to persuasion or deception, intimidation, and I believe all that kind of stuff is in the Dungeon Master's Guide as well to do those kind of mechanics. If it's the latter, if you're in the wilderness, then maybe consider a hex crawl, which is basically you split the wilderness into hexes, and then the players will chart their way through these hexes. They can go 6 different directions from each hex, and it will give them a feeling of really exploring unknown wilds and charting. So they'll know that this hex had a minotaur in it, this hex had a druidic circle in it, this one was empty, this one was empty, and they'll be rolling random encounters every time as well. Or you can do a mixture of both, and you can have the hex crawl in between the 2 cities. Maybe don't just say, you travel along the road. Maybe there are no roads where we're going. Maybe they have to get to the next city and they have to go through the wilderness. Maybe nobody goes outside the cities. So the third step is to create the assets, create just things to be in your world. You've set your setting and you know what kind of adventure that you want to have. So now it's time to just add in stuff. People, towns, villages, shops, all this kind of stuff, monsters. And you don't need to put them in a place. You can just have them in a list. Generate a bunch of NPCs, a bunch of names, generate a bunch of monsters, random encounters, and just have them. And then see what the players are doing. Because once you plop them in your big open world, you don't really know where they're going to go, what they want to do. So try and keep the stuff in front of them, like you're building the railroad as the train is going along. And try and remember the theme of your setting and the theme of your adventure. If you're gonna do more social encounters, then create NPCs that have their own goals and interesting tics and voices and personality types and allegiances that they have. And if it's more of a wilderness one, then you're going to want to come up with interesting monsters and roaming bands of things, and even just come up with encounters that are not combat-y. Come up with groups of monsters who are maybe they're retreating from a battle they've just lost, or maybe they're starving and they want to just find some food. Don't make everything out to kill the players. Make it a little bit more interesting. So my fourth step is create fronts. Now you've heard me talk about fronts before. Fronts are my favorite dungeon mastering tool. When I learned about fronts from the Dungeon World DM section, it was like, if you don't know what fronts are, they're basically just factions, and each of these factions, you give them a goal. So an evil faction's goal will be to, like a dragon cult will be to summon Tiamat, the dragon, the multi-headed dragon god, and they will have step-by-step plans on how they're going to do that. And the idea is that you'll have like a bad guy front, you'll have a good guy front, or like a status quo front, and then you'll have a few neutral ones as well. And they'll all have their own goals, and between sessions you will basically advance the front's goals they'll inch towards their goals. And what's cool about this is that players can hinder or change the steps to the goals of the front. So say the evil front, one of the steps to summoning Tiamat is to go and raid a dragon tomb or something like that, or go and do some evil ritual. If the players manage to stop them, then the front's progress is stopped. However, if they don't stop them, then maybe there's like kobolds or dragony cults that maybe they've got even more power now. And also don't be afraid to let the fronts actually change their plans based on what the players are doing. If they've really been a thorn in their side, then maybe the fronts are just gonna be like, okay, we need to get rid of these adventuring little shits because they are really stopping us from doing what we need to do. So they just, they will chase down the players, or they will try and trap them or something. And you can say to the players, you've raided half of their bases, you've taken out most of their assets, like, they're getting pretty desperate now, they want to take you out. And the fifth step is, so now you've got your fronts, and you've got your style of campaign, and your setting, you've got your things in the world, you've got how they're interacting, you've got this world that basically could run itself. If the players weren't there, the fronts would just interact with each other, and things would happen. But now you have to kind of pick how the players are going to get involved. You have to create the plot hooks. You can come up with the plot hooks, have the leaders of the factions, the kings, the lords, maybe even the neutral factions as well, and the bad faction, and offering the players gold or resources, or just trying to appeal to their sense of honor and justice to get them to help them, and as well just to make it seem like it's more of a living world, and especially because you kind of want to distract the players a little bit from the main quest. You want them to see that if they don't, there is a sense of urgency with the main quest. If they faff around too much, but side quests can introduce this kind of juggling of more balls at once, which can be really fun and intense. One of my favorite kind of side quests is the Cursed Ring side quest, which is basically like players will be tricked or given a ring that probably gives them a buff or something, but actually they can't take it off, and it'll start giving them weird nightmares, or it will start having adverse effects. Slowly but surely it will start to become a mechanical debuff, and so there'll be this, okay, I know we need to save the town, but this fucking ring is killing me right now. We need to sort this out. So the players can either choose to trick someone else into taking the ring, which is what I did, or you can try and find an NPC who can help them remove it. And also, fronts don't have to be these huge, massive, thousands of person organizations. You could have one of the Adventuring League factions. Maybe they have one agent who basically spots out one of your players and is like, I'm going to get that person to do my bidding. So if you have like a soldiery one or an honorable one, or you have like a more of a chaotic elven one, they can be kind of easily seduced into being and into a faction that is more aligned with their own goals. So then the party suddenly has, they have to choose between, again, the main quest and supporting the party, or actually these things line up with what I believe in. So basically, fronts can be people or they can be organizations, but the idea is you want to be pulling the players in lots of directions, so they're never kind of stuck. They never feel like they're in a empty theme park, where everything's just a facade. And also, don't forget, the players can fail, and they should be allowed to fail. If only because if they fail, then they learn better, and it's less boring. But also, if they fail to do the main quest, if they let the bad thing happen, or they fail to stop the bad thing from happening, or maybe they only partially succeed, that can lead on to another adventure. That can create more content. Like in my Dark Heresy campaign, the players failed to catch the main cultist. So the next adventure was all about following this guy down and tracking him down on this spaceport, and it was a whole thing. And it already gives players this objective in mind that they want to complete because they failed and they really want to succeed this time. So that's my 5 steps for world building. And as I said at the top, if you want, like how I started was, I literally I wanted to do a little 2-session quest in between the published adventures that we were doing. I wanted to just give it a go. I put the players on a planet that was hardly anything on it. I made a map and I made 2 or 3 little fronts, and it just felt so much more satisfying, doing DMing that way. And the prep as well becomes a real joy because it's all your stuff and you're planning all these fronts and everything, and you don't have to read this published book and you have to kind of think of all these things, and you don't really know why they've done it like that and what purpose it serves. And it will come through in the DMing as well at the table. If you don't really get why there's a young green dragon in these ruins, how are the players going to engage with that? I'm looking at you, Lost Mines of Fandelver. So, you will have much more control over it. And I think, as long as you put the work in, it's so much more satisfying as well. So that's it. Thank you, Rob, for that question. I hope that helps. If it doesn't, sorry. You can comment and I can follow it with more tips if you want. But yeah, just give it a go. Do one session if you want. Come up with a little adventure, even if it's like a silly thematic one, a Halloween one or a Christmas one or something like that. Just just to wet your whistle. That's all from me. Check out this blog on diceencounters.com if you want to read it as well. Comment if you like. Subscribe as well. I do a video every week about role playing games, and the next one will be up next week. So until then.